Hello, and welcome back to Catching Up to Fi. I'm Bill Yount with my co-host Becky Heptig, and today we have a special treat for you. Maybe Becky should describe it, though.
Well, today we have a live show that was recorded at CampFI Rocky Mountain week 1. The hosts of Mile High Fi, Doug Cunnington and Carl Jensen, were at this camp along with myself and Mark Trautman. And we set up a panel of the 4 of us and answered questions from the audience. The attendees of camp they submitted questions on Saturday. And Saturday night, we had what we call at CampFI a pop-up podcast and answered everybody's questions. And it was hilarious and fun.
Yeah, I've listened to it, and it is fun. It's a little bit different for us. There's some actionable tips in there on tangible questions. And then there's some silly questions to just have fun with. So this is a little bit of a break from the intense book reviews and high-powered speakers. This is a little real. We certainly hope you enjoy it. And there'll be more live podcasts coming in the future. We may even record one from Podcast Movement, which we're attending next month.
Absolutely. And I've never been to that before. I can't wait to meet the folks there and see what we learn about being podcasters.
Yeah, I'm curious. When I listened to the episode from CampFI, which we recommend to all our listeners, there's several of them all over the country. You'll meet Becky because she goes to several of them as well. But at any rate, when I listened to it, I found that it's a great place to be. You meet like-minded people. You talk about individual wants and needs, philosophical roles of money. There's just so much to gain from this because you can listen to us on the podcast or you can meet us at CampFI. And for us, I think the virtual relationships migrating to real relationships is incredibly rewarding. And we wish that for all of you.
Absolutely. And that's actually a comment that I hear so many times from folks is that they've met folks online in Zoom calls, masterminds, whatever it is. And then when you get to meet someone face to face, it is so much more meaningful. This was my 7th CampFI, and I don't necessarily, in fact, I've had people ask why I come. I don't necessarily need to go to learn anymore, although I do learn something at each one, but I'm going for the social aspect and the connection with the community. I learn, I meet folks each time I go that I have a connection with, and those relationships have been so much fun and so meaningful. So if you've never been to a CampFI, I would suggest that you try one out. You might like it.
Well, the format really is also encouraging because on the 2 days, it's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday in large part. And the 2 days that you're there, you have lectures generally in the morning, followed by an activity. I remember when I was at my one CampFI out in Rocky Mountain, where I missed Becky by a week.
That's right. Passing in the night.
We went to Garden of the Gods, which is absolutely beautiful. Colorado Springs is a beautiful area. You stay at areas where it's really sort of communal, low-key. You play games. You just chat. You have a few beers usually along those lines.
Maybe a few.
I imagine Becky and Mark and maybe a few others had a beer sitting in front of them when they were recording the podcast.
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Well, it should be a lot of fun. Certainly had fun listening to it. We hope you enjoy this style of episode. Give us your feedback and let us know if you'd like to hear more like this. It's fun for us. We hope it's fun for you. And we hope you find also those actionable tips again that you've been telling us all about. Don't forget to avail yourself of the website. There's a lot of resources there. Don't forget to hopefully give us a review on Apple Podcasts so that we can reach more and more people. We've been seeing a growing success in the podcast. We're pushing towards our goal of 100,000 downloads. And the guest lineup that we have is just absolutely fantastic. We are so lucky to have such informative guests that are generously giving us their time to give to you.
Yes. And we want your feedback. Get on the Facebook page, ask your questions, give us your comments. There is a way to leave us a voice message from the website. You can leave us messages there, ask your questions. We just love hearing from our audience.
Absolutely, Becky. So let's get on with the episode and let them find out what this is all about.
Here we go.
Hi, and welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, life on the journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Becky, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your hosts. We're here to help you with your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting from.
We're going to talk to other late starters, experts, and we'll explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together.
Hello, world. Hello, CampFI. Welcome to the Mile High Fi podcast. I'm Carl Jensen with my co-host.
I'm Doug Cunnington.
And we have two more special humans on the panel tonight. Why don't you tell us your name and what you do?
I'm Becky Heptig. I'm the co-host of Catching Up to FI.
And I'm Mark Trautman. I'm just an imposter up here answering questions with the three of you guys.
So we have questions that were submitted all through the day. We're going to go through as many as we can, and we're actually sitting here with a live studio audience. So thanks for all the questions, and let's get to the first one.
All right, here we go. For stock market, best place to invest your money in current market, individual stocks, ETFs, covered calls, and where have you personally invested?
I would say that I don't think it matters what kind of market you're in. I think pick a plan, stick to the plan. And for me personally, I use index funds. It's mostly equities, and I have a very limited amount of fixed income, and that's really just short-term treasuries. And that's my personal plan. So this is not advice. We need our little guy up here.
Yes, where's our
man
disclaimer?
up
Sure.
here.
Yep.
But that's what I do, and I think that works in all environments.
I'm a big fan of crypto, specifically Doug coin. I don't know. Yeah, Doug has his own coin, and it's awesome. What is it up, like 1,000,000% in the past hour?
Yeah, I'll tell y'all all about it in a few minutes. You're going to get it on the ground floor.
All right, next one. Best budget travel places.
I know Carl just went to Hawaii. Wasn't that a budget? That was a budget item, right?
I could say the opposite of that. We went for a helicopter ride in Hawaii, so I think I'm the least qualified person to answer this question.
I think we might top you on that one because Becky and I just got off a cruise from Alaska, and that was definitely not
the budget
an inexpensive budget. It probably could be, but it wasn't the way we did it.
I do think I have a good answer for this. I've found that my travel is more rewarding when I build it around people. This past weekend, I met Patrick and Julie, who live in Eau Claire, and I have a Midwest road trip. There they are in the audience, and that's going to be pretty cheap, I think. I don't think Eau Claire does not sound like a fancy place, so I would say... No, I'm not taking anything. It sounds great, but what I found is super cool is building travel around interesting places and the people. I think the people make it much more fun, and that might even be my priority. We just visited Mark in Crested Butte.
And I didn't send you the bill yet for that, by the way.
Doug, what's your address for the bill?
Well, I'll throw in that we are trying to visit all the national parks. Mm-hmm. So traveling there may or may not be expensive, but typically once you get there, you can kind of control your costs. And it's not a destination with people necessarily, but you can kind of build road trips around it. And that's typically what we try to do. Yeah.
And I'd like to add that I think just being in this community, you'll meet a lot of people and be able to maybe stay at their houses or whatever. And I have found that to be, adding that social aspect, but also it often is very economical to just find friends in the community and potentially stay with each other and so forth, or travel together and maybe get an Airbnb together and bring the cost down.
Absolutely. And our community is spread all across the world. So there's going to be somebody somewhere. All right, next. How do you find your niche within the podcast world? And I'm going to say for us, it was just a personal passion. I have a passion for financial literacy for folks who are older, because my husband and I started so late. We were up against a wall because we had made so many poor choices early in life, and then we had to do something really big, really fast. And it kind of got painful. And so my goal was to try to help folks not do that. So my niche came out of my personal passion.
And I'd love to hear what your niche is. And that was directed to Carl and Doug.
Carl, what do you think the show's about?
Asparagus?
We talk a lot about asparagus, more than you would think for a FI podcast. I have a couple podcasts, and kind of the same, Becky. It's like something you're passionate about because people probably won't listen. They don't care about you or what you're saying until you do it for a while. So you have to be passionate, I think, so that you can get some traction and kind of stick with it for a while. Now, your show got traction pretty quick, though, right?
It did. And that tells me that we are targeting an underserved segment of the population, which we kind of knew that ahead of time, but we got more response than we expected.
Right.
And the other thing I would say is sort of like starting a side hustle. I mean, we don't monetize our podcast, so it's not a side hustle, but if you could apply some of the same principles of find a problem and solve it. Mm-hmm. That.
See a need, fill a need, right?
That's right.
Who was that? I was in Robots or something, that movie. Yeah.
Anything else? Good.
Yeah, I just think be passionate and excited for whatever you talk about. There's some podcasts I listen to, and I don't really care much for the subject material, but the hosts make it so interesting that I listen to it anyway.
And that's what we're going for, right?
Yes. We have nothing to add to the world.
That sounds right.
All right, next. Society and social media show the wins and positives in life. What is a failure you've experienced? How did you overcome it? And what lesson have you taken from it?
Failures.
Ooh.
All right. So I'll go quick here. I have a lot to choose from, but I had a foreclosure because I made a bad purchasing decision with a house in 2005. Kind of a bad time to buy. I thought maybe I'd be able to rent it out in the future. Of course, I didn't do any research or think about it. I was like, maybe I'll do that. It was underwater after a few years. I actually tried to rent it out, lost like $200 or $300 a month for, I don't know, too long, 2 or 3 years, and then decided to strategically let it go to default. The foreclosure took place. It ended up being a great financial decision, but it was like a matter of risk management, and then no one gives you advice to do the foreclosure. Everyone says, don't do it. It'll fuck things up for 7 years or longer. But it ended up being great, and I had to get a lot of things organized ahead of time. But yeah, that was a failure, but I got out of it.
I think my big one, and I can think of lots of examples, is focusing too much on money and not enough on life. My famous one that my wife likes to talk about is we were flying to CampFI in Florida, and instead of getting a direct flight there, I saved like $20 by going to Minnesota and then Chicago and then Gainesville, I think. I am banned from not clicking the nonstop button on the Southwest website from this point on.
And I can add one, and this was going way back, but I did try options trading it was like index options trading. I think I lost somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000, and that was in the early 90s. So I don't know what that is in present value. It was definitely a lesson in short-term trading, which I certainly didn't do after that point in time. But so it was a failure, but it was also a good lesson at the same time.
Sure. All right, next. And this question is directed at Carl. Carl, what caused dinosaurs to become extinct?
Well, Diana told me it was Cincinnati chili. I think it was the asteroid, right? The Earth was at the wrong place at the wrong time.
We saw one today. I was a little worried about that. I don't know how many people saw the meteor today. That was crazy.
Yeah. So during the hike, go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
Yeah, during the hike, the number of us just saw this super bright light. But at first it kind of looked like a firework, but it was coming down, and it was pretty bright out. So it's rare that you see it. And I wasn't the only one. I wasn't, wasn't flashbacks or anything. I checked and made sure and other people saw it too. So I think I'm on good ground there.
Yeah. What did you have in your water bottle this morning?
Well, we can talk about that off the record.
All right, next. At what point in a relationship do you start sharing details of finances or having financial conversations? And I will say that I made the mistake of I didn't have conversations about anything terribly important beforehand. Not just finances, but lots of stuff that should have been discussed before we got married.
Yeah, I would say I met my wife when we were very young, and I think we were on the same page about everything. So we started off initially talking about everything, and I think that was a good thing. So we were always aware of our finances together and other things together too. So that was our experience.
Cool.
The funny thing was, Mindy and I had this conversation, and the funny thing was, I don't think we ever talked about money before we got married, but there were signs in mine as I actually felt a little bit embarrassed about this. On our first date, she's like, "Where should we go?" And I had bought this, there's like a fundraiser coupon book, and there was a buy one, get one free at this barbecue place. I'm like, "Hey, I've got this coupon for a free meal." And I had forgotten about this, and she reminded me, and I was kind of horrified. I'm like, "I did that on our first date?" I'm like, "Wow, I did." But then the thing she told me is like, I thought that was good. I thought you might have been good with money after I saw that. So, we didn't have the conversation. You see these little hints there. Like, ask your date where they want to go if they're good for the Taco Bell, like $5 box. I think it's $8 box with inflation. Like, maybe they're marriage material.
All right. What's better, increasing income or decreasing expenses? And then the second follow-up question, who amongst you is the better singer?
I'm definitely not the singer.
Yeah, I'm not the singer.
I heard you're
either.
the dancer, though.
Yeah, we will dance later.
Well, not me and you.
Yeah. Well,
maybe.
You could follow.
Well,
right?
That's true. Well, maybe. We'll see.
I think maybe earning more, and I come from an entrepreneurship side, so I'm like, I see more upside there. I can't answer both because that's missing the point of the question. But yeah, what do y'all think?
Oh, I think income, because you can only go so far down, and it becomes a bad thing to go too far down. So, and there's lots of ways to make money.
Yeah, I agree. I think initially it's relatively easy to look around and see some opportunities to cut expenses, but increasing the income is probably where you're going to have the bigger leverage.
Right, and that might even be a different conversation if you are. Let's say you're married and your spouse is not on board. If you try to frugal down too much, you're going to get some pushback or some resentment. But definitely look around and see what you're spending money on that maybe isn't important to you. Cutting expenses is important, but the increasing income has a bigger upside. Right. Who should pay for the first date?
We had a discussion about this at lunch, as a matter of fact.
Ooh.
And I'm not in the dating field and haven't been for eons, so I can't answer that. But if I had to guess, I almost think it would be cool to split it, right? But I could be wrong. You guys have any opinions on that?
Yeah, it's been a while for me too. I would think, I don't know. I think I would still pay for it. I don't know.
Can I go on a date with you? We're going to be dancing.
And you're going to dance. Right.
I have an idea where to take you.
Oh, so. Is it Taco Bell?
With a coupon.
Doug, where was your first date and did you pay for it?
Oh, man, hold on. I think I did. It was a fucking terrible place. Hold on, let me think where it was. It was a bad... I'll say Fuddruckers. It wasn't Fuddruckers, but it was maybe the equivalent of that terrible to go on a first date.
Doug, I like Fuddruckers. You could take me on a date, Doug. I'm not dancing with you, though.
All right. Yeah,
my opinion is going to be whoever does the asking.
Okay.
Oh, good one.
Whoever asked for the date.
So,
yeah.
Just me. Of course, I'm also old-fashioned and think that most of the time that's the guy. All right. Another dating question. Dating while FI. How to meet, how to see if values align, or should you try to convert a significant other to FI?
So this was another conversation at lunch today. It was a big dating conversation, but I think it was firedating.com, and correct me if I'm wrong on that. .me, firedating.me. And apparently there's an episode out there with Paula Pant and Pete, Mr. Money Mustache, talking about this. I don't know which episode it is, but it was on Afford Anything. So if you're interested in learning more about that, that was news to me.
So is there a FI dating site?
Yeah.
Is there really?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Are you going to... Does Steven know
Not that I need it.
I think a great answer to that is to come here. There's single people here. They've passed through the filter, and as far as converting someone, I think it's easier just to dismiss that person and find a new person.
You know, at CampFI Mid-Atlantic, there was a table at lunch for singles in the fire community. And I think there were, 20-something people and it went over really well. They had a great time. So, yes, come to CampFI. There may be a dating table.
Yes. Well, and, on the cruise, there were meetups for the singles on the cruise.
Yeah.
So, hey.
I didn't go to that one.
Yeah.
Just
saying.
Age might have been a factor.
All right. With the plethora of podcasts and other content, what sets yours apart?
We have a good time. So we wouldn't do it if we weren't having fun. So we're kind of light on the FI material, I think, because it's been done before, and we're not trying to recreate the wheel. So we have a good time, usually have great conversations, and I think our personalities come out.
Yeah, that's for worse on my part.
What about you, Becky?
I forgot the question already.
Well, you have it in front of you, right?
No, it's behind me.
It's been tossed.
It's been tossed. Sorry.
Okay.
Moving on. But this is another podcast question, and I will answer this one. What do you wish for your podcast audience to do better, or change to help your podcasts? And I'm not real sure what they mean by to help the podcast. I'm hoping that my audience changes for the better to help themselves. And you mentioned that it's all been done, and it has all been done, although on our podcast, we are sort of starting back at basics and moving forward from there, because the people listening to our podcast maybe haven't listened to anything else before. So, we're trying to help people get their money lives turned around and pointed in the right direction. And then also what we're trying to do is offer hope, because there's so many of our audience that think it's too late and that have lost hope. They kind of are ready to give up. Once they realize what they've done, and they have this whole emotional ball to deal with that shame, regret, remorse, guilt. And then once they get past that, sometimes it just feels too hard. So that's what we offer our audience.
I cannot follow that up.
Yeah, that was a pretty good answer.
Okay. All right. Next. Oh, another podcast question. Is there someone in the audience that wants to start a podcast? How do you keep your podcast from becoming an echo chamber? In which ways do you go against the personal finance grain?
I think the podcast speaks for itself for you guys.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
We've definitely done things a little bit differently. And this episode that I'm thinking of, it'll be out in a little while. But basically, Carl was out. He was doing something, I don't know, installing a bidet perhaps. But Amberly and I did a show on why we should have our FI membership cards revoked, because we do all these things that you're not supposed to do. So I think our show does kind of go against the grain, and we did a 4-part series on how frugality is bad, and it ends up making it harder to spend money later. And a lot of us, I don't know, we took a lot of pride in saving. We got really good at it, and now it's hard to flip the switch. And you're going through the transition right now, right?
Yeah.
I'm coaching him.
Yeah.
What was the original question?
How does your podcast go against the personal finance grain?
Yeah, I think we talk about whatever we want to talk about. That might not be such a great answer, but we probably go against a lot of different grains, I think.
Yeah.
Get some hate mail.
Especially in your sponsorship discussions.
Yeah, we have no sponsors. If you want to learn how to do a podcast that doesn't get any sponsors that you have to pay to do, listen to it. We have fun though, right?
It is fun.
Well, it is. And my opinion is sort of, if you don't like what I'm talking about, go someplace else. Yeah. There's a lot of people out there. All right. Best first credit card for a young 20-year-old, non-travel related.
Well, I think, if it's non-travel related, just do the cashback card. And, again, not an affiliate, not promoting anything, but, there are cards out there that will give you 2% cash back. I would look into those. That's probably the easy button if you're not looking to do travel rewards or anything like that. You guys have any other suggestions on that?
Nope, works for me. All right. This person's asking for a poll. Who has practiced borrowing against life insurance policy, sometimes called infinite banking?
Not me.
No, yeah, it sounds kind of scammy, so I haven't done that.
No. I mean, I'm a fan of just term life insurance and not whole life insurance, but that's just me.
Right. And yeah, that's what we're past the point of having life insurance, but that's what we would do also.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
one other sorry to interrupt you, but one other failure that I had was I bought whole life insurance as an investment to do that kind of shit. And that was in my early 20s. And then recently I got rid of it and just got the cash out. Luckily, I was in there long enough.
Luckily that they took all your money for 10 years. Yeah, and you could get out scot-free.
I had a little bit of a return, and anyway, I got out of there and got some money back. So, yeah, I would say some insurance salesman is trying to sell you something.
So the consensus is probably not.
Yeah.
All right.
Don't do it. Okay.
Where will I meet a financially independent man who can travel the world with me and dance salsa?
I think that one was signed, too. I won't name names.
No, but we know who it is. We know who it is. All right. Any world-traveling salsa dancers that are of the male persuasion in the audience? Do we have any takers?
No.
I'm so sorry. For the 4% withdrawal rule, how frequent are the withdrawals made?
Well, I mean, generally people that are going to withdraw from their portfolio are going to do it, in most cases that I see, on a monthly basis. So that's the direct answer to that question.
Creating your paycheck.
Right, creating a monthly paycheck, or you could pay yourself, twice a month or whatever you used to, whether it's weekly. There really is no right or wrong answer to that.
So I guess so let me ask this. The 4% withdrawal would be 4% per year.
It's basically, let's say you had $1 million portfolio, hypothetical, of course. So it's $40,000 a year in year one, adjusted for inflation. So in year two, whatever inflation was, it would be $40,000 plus that inflation rate for year two, and then you continue on. So it's not 4% per year. It's 4% from that starting year's portfolio value.
Right. And then taking that number, and if you wanted to pay yourself monthly, just divide that by 12.
Correct.
Okay. Got it. What would you improve about the FI community?
I would like, and I think the FI community is doing this already, having more discussions about non-financial things, the non-financial side of financial independence. So purpose, and there was great discussions, great breakout sessions here at this camp about that. And Ryan's presentation was a perfect example of that. So I liked seeing more and more of that.
Yes. And I think that what the FI community is doing well is the connection and relationship part.
I don't like the rush to judgment, so sometimes you'll see people, this especially happens online, surprise, surprise, YouTube comments, where people will throw someone under the bus for that decision, and you've never met that person, you don't know, they're 50 years old, you don't know what accumulation of experiences they've had in those 50 years that led up to that decision. So stop being judgy and try to understand the other person before you say some mean thing.
Yep, I agree. All right, what's the craziest financial mistake you've seen someone make? And I'm going to answer that for me. One of the first things right after we got married was we bought a house. We got married in 79, bought a house in 1980. We'd been married 6 months. And everybody was like, got to buy a house, got to buy a house. And that was during what ended up being the end of an oil boom. We lived in Houston in an oil town. We didn't know it was going to bust. And we bought a house for $64,000, which was a lot of money then. We paid on it. We moved away, couldn't sell it. The housing market tanked in Houston. Moved away, couldn't sell it, rented it at a loss, moved back to it, tried to sell it again, couldn't sell it, moved away into the home we wanted to be in forever, and rented it again, and finally sold it. We'd owned it for 12 years and paid on it. And when we sold the home, we took the keys and a check to the closing table. We still owed money on it. So that was my mistake.
I once saw a friend inherit multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars. Within like 5 years, it was all gone and nothing to show for it.
Wow.
I have one, and that is seeing some families raise children that become economically dependent on those parents. So kind of economic outpatient care. And it sounds like it's not a big deal, but when you compound that over many years, that is potentially really detrimental to those parents. So sorry, Katie, you're off balance sheet.
This is for real estate gurus. Best type of properties to invest in the current market, residential, commercial, and best parts of the country.
Carl, you're the expert in this group, I think.
Yeah, expert in the loosest of terms because I am not an expert. But real estate, you can make more money than you can in the stock market, but you have to do a lot of research. So I don't think there is one right answer. It's whatever your area of expertise and whatever you spend time studying. Like the past house that we bought, it took us 3 years to find it. We subscribed to the MLS. We saw every listing that came across. We studied it so much that we could probably tell within 10 seconds whether it was a deal worth pursuing. So it's not an easy answer. If you're going to get into real estate, you're going to have to put your time in. Especially now, it's a different environment, high rates, and I know nothing about, what do they say, commercial and multifamily?
Mm-hmm. Residential, commercial.
Yeah, I might be able to tell you a little bit about residential, but commercial I know nothing about. I would say pick a niche, find some smart people to maybe work for and learn from them. But you can make money with any kind of real estate in any environment. But I would say put your time in and do the work.
Mm-hmm. All right. What was the pivotal moment in your FI journey?
Oh, I can go quick here. I moved to Longmont, and that helped a lot because I met Carl, joined the co-working space, and I was kind of aware of the fire movement, but I didn't really pay too much attention. But once I got into the community, y'all sucked me in, I guess. So it's great.
Yeah, I would say my pivotal moment was when I was hired as a 23-year-old at a company, and I got a big raise. And the boss that I had said, max out your 401k with your raise. You'll still effectively have a larger paycheck, even with maxing it out. I went home. I talked to my wife. I said, do you have one of these 401k things? And she said, yes. And I was like, you need to max it out. And we both did that from our early 20s. And that's what basically enabled us to retire early.
Wow.
So max out your 401k.
So this is always kind of weird with Pete in the audience, but this whole story happened in about 15 minutes. I was having a bad time at work. I Googled, how do I retire early? Up came this Mr. Money Mustache guy, and I'm like, wow, this guy says you can retire at like 30 or 31. I found a scam, and then like 5 minutes later, I'm like, it's not a scam. It's all about numbers. So I ran out to my wife, who was in the kitchen doing something. I'm like, hey, I've been having a bad time at work. I'm really unhappy and all. She's like, yeah. She's like, I discovered this Mustache guy on the internet. She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, he says I can quit. We just have to save up a little bit more, and then I can leave my job. And she's like, okay, yeah, that sounds great. In my head, I'm like, are you nuts? I just came out of the office with this talking about mustaches and all this stuff. But then the funny thing is, the other thought I had after that is, I'm like, he's got this blog, and I kind of like to write, so I think I'm going to do the same thing too. And she's like, it's a terrible idea.
When did you start the blog?
January 1st, 2013.
Okay.
Wow.
And what is it?
1500days.com. That's how many days I thought it would take me to retire.
I'll have to check it out. It sounds cool.
It sucks. Don't we?
One of my pivotal moments was actually being introduced to the FI community by my oldest son. A lot of people have heard me say this before. He said, hey, I think there's this podcast you'd like to listen to. And I said, what's a podcast? And then I said, well, how do you listen to it? So he introduced us to the CUtFI podcast. And it went from there. And then the second pivotal moment was he invited Stephen and I to this camp in 2019. And that opened up this whole new world and community for us. And now our life is sort of centered around all those things that happened because of those two.
And that's where you and I met, too.
That is where we met.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Right here in 2019, talking about money and cars.
Right. I remember that.
All right. If FI is a fad, is FI a fad amongst tired high earners following the events of 2008 to 2021, or does it have staying power?
I would say, from my experience, I didn't discover financial independence in the community until after I had retired and realized I was financially independent. Mm-hmm. So FI has been around a long, long time, well before the kind of FIRE movement became popular. Mm-hmm. So I think this is, if it was in existence prior to what you read about, there's no reason it won't be in existence beyond any, additional social media, exposure and so forth. So it's not a fad. It's plenty of people have been doing this for many, many years.
Right. And you don't have to be a high earner.
No, I don't believe so. I mean, it helps, but.
Right. It gets you there faster, but it's not required.
No.
And I think that the FI community has, in the time I've been aware of it, I think it's morphed into a better thing even than it was at first.
And I want to ask you a question, Carl, to step on top of that. How have you seen the FIRE movement change since you got started blogging in 2013 to now, like 10 years, right?
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear what Becky has to say about my main thing. I just had a conversation earlier when I went to my first conference. It was back in 2013, and it was a bunch of people who looked just like me, like middle-aged dudes who program computers, and now it's much more diverse, and that's really good because this should be for everyone. There's so much value in getting your money and figuring out your finances and your money that this shouldn't just apply to dude programmer pros. Mm-hmm. Becky, how do you think it's changed?
I think it's changed from the super frugaling, we're going to eat beans and rice and get there as fast as we can, to let's enjoy the journey along the way and just create the life we want to have. If it takes a little longer, that's okay.
Yeah, I think there's more of a focus on what happens afterwards now. Before it was all about eating beans and living. I think the Jacob Lund Fisker guy lived in like someone's basement or something like that. And now I think we're talking about spending, and I hope the part that comes after that is how we get back, because I think a lot of us are we save more than we need to, and we're going to end up with more. So what do we do with that, and how do we give back to other people of the world?
Oh, absolutely.
I think that's the continuation of it all. I hope it is, at least.
Right. And I think there's one of the things I love about coming to CampFI is there's so much of that. I mean, there's some of us in the audience that don't necessarily need to come anymore, to learn something new. I do always learn something new, but it's the connections and it's the giving back. We usually have a chance to sit and chat with someone. I mean, Stephen and I, we've been to 7 CampFIs. And there's only been one where there was someone older than us at the camp. We're always the oldest ones here. We've been around the sun a few more times than other people in the room. And not that we're any smarter than anyone else, but we've got more life experiences. And so we can share those with people too. All right. So what is the best way to increase your rental real estate portfolio with limited time and resources while reducing risk? And with in parentheses, but beside limited time, they have raising a family and having a W-2 job, and then limited resources, meaning money.
Well, I would say, you could always invest in a real estate investment trust, and you can have real estate exposure. It doesn't require really any time. You're not necessarily going to get the sweat equity returns that you would in owning real estate directly, but and I've never really owned real estate other than my primary residence, and I've gotten to financial independence without it. So I don't think you have to do it. And if you choose to do it, great. If you don't choose to do it, that's fine too.
Mm-hmm. I don't know anything about rental real estate. We've also not done it, but I've seen other people do turnkey rentals, which seems to be a little less labor intensive.
There's no free rides, right? Like if you're going to hire people to do it, then it's going to cost more, and they have limited resources. So, and then Carl, you did do the sweat equity, and you were putting in like crazy hours or whatever, right?
Yeah, I do that. That's like the opposite answer to the question, because that was not I gave up a lot of my time in life to do that. To answer the question, a syndication might be another option, or putting your money behind people. I do private lending. There's a lot to that as well, but if you can find some good people, there's good people out there who need money, and there's ways to do it to minimize the risk. I think I make like 12% from that, and that's a good deal for them as well.
You heard it here. You can make 12% on syndicated real estate.
It's entertainment purposes only.
Right.
Ramsey, I think that's his number. I feel dirty now.
That was Madoff's number too, right? 12%? I don't know.
All right. Believe it or not, we are at the last question.
Wow.
We did good. We did good. All right. Our adult children moved out of our primary home. So, question number 1. Our son leased his own vehicle and wants us to add him to our policy. Is this fraud? Is it a good idea? And would claims be covered? I don't have, I think you got to talk to an insurance agent.
Well, technically, if you're going to have someone have a vehicle under your policy, they need to be under your roof. Mm-hmm. So if they're not under your roof, they technically have to have their own policy.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that generally answers most of that question. I didn't quite hear the last part because someone was whispering in my ear.
It was me.
He's sitting at the dance date.
Yeah, we were talking about salsa.
Okay. So the question was, their son leases his own vehicle and wants the parents to add him to their policy.
I think I got that because I think he's not living in the house, if I recall. Right.
So basically, is that a good idea?
No.
And the answer is no. All right. Yeah. Question number 2, their daughter lives in the parents' rental, and the parents own her vehicle. Can she remain on their policy?
Again, it goes back to, are they under the same roof?
Okay.
That's my understanding, because I was asking for my daughter, who will soon not be under my roof, and how it works, and that was the answer I received. So again, that's my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone with no kids, don't take my answer too seriously. But stop paying for your kids' stuff. Make them pay for their own shit.
Yeah, didn't we just talk about economic outpatient care, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
But I don't have kids, so I don't know.
No, they're capable.
So
all right.
We hit the end of our questions, but I have a question for you, Mark. So you retired early. Can you tell us when and how old you were? And then I want to talk about your fun bucket, which sounds worse out of context, but you'll describe it in a second.
So
Mark's fun bucket. Yeah.
So I retired at the end of 2017. So that's what, almost, coming up on 8 years, I guess, or 7.5. And I was age 50. I also had a challenge spending that money, hence the fun bucket. And if you want me to go into what that is, or you want to ask me a question about that?
Yeah, just tell us the concept, because I think, one of the themes we're running into is like, it is harder for us to turn off the saving muscle and start spending a little bit. So how did you address it with the fun bucket?
Yeah, so actually it was an idea of a friend of mine who was in a similar situation, slightly different age, but had retired a number of years prior. We were both kind of looking back, and this was probably, I want to say 2 years ago, so 5 years into retirement. I had, and he had the same sequence, obviously, in that prior 5 years. And we were kind of talking about how our portfolios had done better than expected. And so therefore, what to do with that? Should we re-retire and reset our, withdrawal rate, or should we do something different? And he said, I have a fun bucket, and that's something you might want to consider. And I'm like, what the hell is a fun bucket? And he said, well, basically, take some of the cream off the top of the portfolio, this excess return that you didn't expect, stick it over into a separate savings account, literally label it fun bucket, which I've done, and allow yourself to spend on things that you wouldn't ordinarily spend on. So those things included, for instance, maybe I would be out to dinner with some friends and I'd pick up the check. Or so now, of course, everyone's going to want to go out to dinner with me, right? And I'm not picking up your check.
Yeah, I asked
because you said you were going to.
I was going to take you.
Right,
yeah.
Right, exactly. Or potentially like upgrade to a higher class on an airline, or stay in a nicer hotel. And what I found was that just having the ability to do that, knowing that there was money set aside outside of the financial independence portfolio that I was living on, allowed me to do things and make decisions that I wouldn't ordinarily do. So it kind of flexed that spending muscle. And what I also found was I would say, you can reimburse yourself from this. So I put it on a credit card like we all do to get the points and all that stuff. And then when the bill comes, I can pay for it out of the fun bucket. What I found was a lot of these decisions I was making were actually fitting in with my normal kind of paycheck lifestyle. And I wasn't really having to reimburse myself as much as I thought, but just having the money there was allowing me to make those decisions. Now, we did do this big cruise. Mm-hmm. And when that came up as an idea, I was like, I'm all in. Didn't even have to think about it. Didn't have to say, I don't know. Is there enough money? Do I want to pull out of the portfolio? Back and forth. I was just like, I'm all in. And the group of us are going to Amy Minkley's FI Freedom Retreat in Bali. Again, no-brainer decision. I'm in. Let's go. Let's do this. So it has allowed me to do more things and kind of get more comfortable spending. And it doesn't affect my long-term, viability of my financial plan in any way.
So do you have a finite amount right now in that fund bucket? Like, this isn't, I can just spend willy-nilly whatever I want.
No. So I basically kind of came up with this number in my mind, which I would say was in the vicinity of maybe 25% more than my normal annual spending. Mm-hmm. So like a 25% bonus amount, right? And I funded it for a 4-year period. And so that was 2 years ago, and I've actually only spent about a year's worth because it was about less than half. So hence the bigger trips that are happening, right?
Right.
So we did book another cruise for next year, so that's going to drain the fun bucket a little bit. But, when I get to the end of that 4-year period, I will probably just replenish it again because, again, my sequence has been very good so far. Even with the market downturn and everything, I still have a lot of, kind of excess from that early 5-year period. So I will probably just, replenish that fun bucket when the time comes. Mm-hmm. Lots of fun.
Lots of fun.
That's awesome. Any follow-up questions, Carl?
I don't think so. I guess I do have one for Mark, and I know I asked you about this before. Does the fun bucket turn it into like a fun wheelbarrow, and then maybe a fun dump truck, and then maybe one of those massive fun, and then you're going to take us all on a first flight, you're going to charter a plane and take us all to like Ireland on a tour?
I would love to do a charter jet one day, but I don't think the fun bucket is quite going to do that. Maybe. We'll see.
I'm rooting for you, Mark.
Well,
you can do it.
Stephen and I have sort of adopted that same idea, except instead of a fun bucket, we have a fun pail. It's a little one, but we still have it.
Gotcha. And yeah, like, well, Carl, do you have anything like that?
I do not have a fun bucket, but I'm trying to. So one thought I had, we were on the Remeet podcast, and I've done a lot of thinking about that. But real quick, the thought I've had is my day-to-day life is real cheap. I don't want to change anything about it. I like where I live. I like the cars. If we had 100x the money we had now, I wouldn't change a thing about it.
You'd get the Tesla finally, right?
Yeah, I probably would buy that.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, but I think what I'm going to do is do outside spending on some crazy experiences. So I think Pete actually, I stole this idea from you a couple of years ago. Someone asked him what he would do if he had a lot of money. I think you said, correct me if I'm wrong, you'd rent a castle somewhere and invite all your friends and have a big party. I think that sounds like a great idea.
I'm waiting for that invitation.
Mark, you were on the list. So next couple of years.
Oh, you're writing his list?
Well, I'm going to do that. Pete
You're going to do it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Pete might help with the list.
Oh, okay.
So getting good with Pete and me, or maybe Mark and Josh. Yeah.
Sounds like I might be paying for part of this castle.
We'll take your jet, Mark.
We'd have a big room for salsa dancing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Castles usually do have a dance floor.
They do. Absolutely. Right. So, yeah.
Okay, Becky, where can people find you and your podcast?
You can find us at catchinguptophi.com. That is our newly launched website, and we are anywhere podcasts can be found.
Mark, how about you?
I do have a blog, marksmoneymind.com. You can find me there. And at a lot of CampFI events and a lot of certainly like economy, I'll be there for sure. And like I said, the FI Freedom Retreats in Bali, and I'm usually floating around the financial independence community.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. Thanks everyone for the questions. And Carl, I'm ready to dance, buddy.
Yeah, a quick shout out to Steven. So one thing I want to mention, I went to my first CampFI many years ago, and I thought I would drop into the FI community and then drop back out quick. I'd get my money straight, and that'd be it. And here I am 10 years later. If you're at all interested in this type of thing, the people here mostly aren't scary. Maybe you, Doug. But, yeah, Steven's great. Come to one of these events.
Cool. Good
Thanks.
job.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was good.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to 5. We would appreciate it if you could leave a 5-star review so that our message can reach others.
We are not lawyers, financial advisors, accountants, or tax experts. Please consult your own professional advisors before making any important decisions. Our content is for entertainment and education purposes only.
We'll see you next time on Catching Up to 5.